I found some great period dramas on Netflix that barely anyone talks about. One has Olivia Colman getting attacked by filthy letters from the 1920s. Another is basically a Spanish Bridgerton. And one was filmed in the actual Arctic with a Game of Thrones star. Let's see which of these is actually worth your time. Wicked Little Letters is a British black comedy set in a small English seaside town in the 1920s. The story's based on a real case, the Littlehampton libels, where people in town started getting obscene poison pen letters. Olivia Colman plays Edith, who's basically the main target, this super prim spinster. And Jessie Buckley is her neighbor Rose, the local troublemaker who immediately gets blamed for the whole thing. This is a true story, but the movie doesn't treat it like some serious period drama. It's got the costumes and the look, but the tone is filthy, sharp, and very funny. Most of the best insults and lines come straight from the real letters, and a lot of them are so over the top, they got the movie an R rating on language alone. The main reason to watch is Colman and Buckley. Their chemistry is perfect, and you can tell Colman really pushed to get Buckley on board. They're friends in real life, and it shows. The script comes from comedian Johnny Sweet, who found the story in a book a few years back and went all in on the crazy real insults. The mystery isn't anything mind-blowing, but it's the cast and the humor that make the movie work. Just a fun, rude, very British period piece that's actually based on something that happened. This one's like a Spanish Bridgerton. The Lady's Companion is a period comedy drama series set in Madrid in the 1880s. It's all about Elena, who works as a chaperone for three upper-class sisters. She's not your classic proper servant. She's smart, educated, quick with a comeback, and she's got her own shady past. The vibe is part Mary Poppins, part Bridgerton, just with more sarcasm and a lot more swagger. The series really leans into the old-school rules of courtship and high society, then throws Elena in to break them all. There's a ton of balls, flirting, scheming, and all of it is narrated with these cheeky fourth-wall asides, so it feels really modern, almost self-aware. Nadia de Santiago, who plays Elena, is honestly great. She holds the whole thing together. If you're into lush costumes and historical sets, it delivers. The pacing can be a bit too much, though. They cram a lot of drama and romance into just 8 episodes, so it's hard for any of the stories to really breathe. And the fourth wall stuff is fun at first, but honestly, they lean on it a little too often. Still, overall, it's light, fun, self-aware, and has a real sense of style. Fair warning though, Netflix canceled it after 1 season, supposedly for cost reasons, so the story never gets finished. The main reason I checked out Against the Ice was because it's got Nikolai Coster-Waldau from Game of Thrones. He actually co-wrote the script too. It's a survival drama based on a true story, set during a 1909 Arctic expedition. Coster-Waldau plays real Danish explorer Einar Mikkelsen, who heads into Greenland with a rookie crewman, trying to recover some lost records. It's serious old-school survival stuff. There's polar bears, starvation, hallucinations, and just trying not to go completely mad while stuck out there waiting for rescue. The movie is based on Mikkelsen's memoir, Two Against the Ice. Visually, it's impressive. Lots of huge icy landscapes, and they actually filmed it on location in Iceland and Greenland, so the cast and crew went through real Arctic conditions. But I'll say, the movie's more about mood and grit than non-stop tension. It's a 100-minute movie that honestly feels longer, but people really responded to it. When it dropped on Netflix, it went straight into the top 10 globally and racked up more than 30 million hours watched in its first week. So if you want an old-school survival film and you like that icy vibe, it's worth checking out. If you grew up with the old Anne of Green Gables series, this new version is definitely a different vibe. First off, it's from one of the writers of Breaking Bad, so you know it's not going to be all sunshine. It still follows Anne Shirley, this imaginative orphan girl who gets taken in by the Cuthberts on Prince Edward Island. At its core, it's still about Anne trying to find love and a family at Green Gables. But this show dives way deeper and gets a lot darker than the original ever did. Over 3 seasons, it tackles some pretty serious stuff: bullying, racism, even sexual assault. You're not getting just fluffy coming-of-age stories here. The tone bounces between classic Anne whimsy and some pretty heavy social commentary, so it's definitely a more complex retelling. Some fans say it goes too dark, others think that's what makes it interesting. And when Netflix and CBC canceled the show after 3 seasons, fans went nuts. Over 13 million tweets trying to save it, people buying billboards in Times Square, even calling into CBC's earnings calls. That's dedication. I get why it's polarizing, but it's still worth a watch just to maybe form your own opinion. Plus, the rustic cinematography and the costumes are genuinely great. It's almost Christmas, so I had to throw in a classic. Merry Christmas tells the true story of the Christmas truce during World War I in 1914. It's set on the Western Front, where French, Scottish, and German soldiers are basically killing each other in the trenches, but on Christmas Eve, they just stop. They leave their trenches and come out to no man's land to sing carols and share food. The cast is huge. You've got a German tenor and his soprano lover, Benno Furman and Diane Kruger, a Scottish priest, a French lieutenant, a German lieutenant, and they're all just trying to get through the war. The singing scenes are great, there's football, gifts, and for a couple of hours, enemies become friends. It's definitely sentimental, like it's Christmas, so you expect that. But it's also a real story. This truce actually happened. There's bloodshed at the start, but mostly it's about finding humanity in the middle of hell. Perfect Christmas movie, honestly. It even got an Oscar nomination for Best Foreign Language Film. Lady J is a French period drama, and not just some random TV movie. This one actually screened at the Toronto Film Festival before Netflix picked it up for the US. The story's pretty straightforward. Set in France just before the Revolution, a wealthy widow falls for a total libertine, gets rejected, and decides to get her revenge. She teams up with a mother and daughter to teach her old lover a lesson and ends up tricking him into marrying a former prostitute. If you've seen Dangerous Liaisons, you'll know the type of setup, but what Lady J lacks in pure glamour, it more than makes up for in style. The whole thing is beautiful, and every shot looks like it could be a painting. It's honestly worth watching just for the way it looks. The plot's a little predictable, but it fits the time and the characters, and it never feels out of place. This is the one with Melissa Leo going all in, playing Madeleine Murray O'Hare, the founder of the American Atheist Association and a real-life icon. It's a Netflix biopic focused on her kidnapping in 1995. O'Hare was called the most hated woman in America in a 1964 Life magazine article, and she was pretty much always in the middle of controversy. Melissa Leo is great here, just completely carries the whole movie. O'Hare was not a likable person, and the film doesn't sugarcoat it. She's prickly, abrasive, a fighter to the end. The script tries to show why, and you see the ugliness she faced for being out in front, pushing back against religious control in America. The real story is actually incredible, but the film just can't quite capture it all. It jumps around a lot, rearranges facts, and turns the whole thing into more of a thriller than a true bio. If you want the real history, this movie's going to get a bunch wrong, but as a watch, it works mostly for Leo's performance. The English Game is a 6-episode Netflix miniseries from Julian Fellowes, the Downton Abbey guy. This one's all about the origins of modern soccer in 19th century England. It's set in the late 1870s and mostly follows 2 players from totally different worlds. You've got Arthur, an aristocrat, total Eton-educated upper-crust guy, and then there's Fergus, a working-class Scottish footballer who's actually one of the first paid professional players. That was a big deal back then. The show mixes up all the actual football stuff with soapy subplots. Factory strikes, people's jobs and relationships on the line, plus all the classic class prejudice. It's Victorian England, so there's a lot of drama about who belongs where, but the show's whole thing is football slowly bringing everyone together. If you know Fellowes, you know what you're getting. High production values, super tidy storylines, lots of period detail, and a pretty straightforward take on the whole class conflict idea. The Guardian famously trashed it, called it Downton Abbey for boys, but I don't think it deserved all that hate. It's a decent miniseries with an interesting historical angle. The Leopard is set in 19th century Sicily during the unification of Italy. It's based on the famous 1958 novel, the same one Visconti adapted into a movie back in the 60s with Burt Lancaster. But this new series goes a lot bigger. 6 episodes, about an hour each, with a budget around 40 million euros. That's on par with early Game of Thrones money, and you see every cent of it on screen. They filmed all over Italy with thousands of extras, and the locations are just beautiful. Seriously, it's one of the most visually stunning shows you'll see this year. As a miniseries, it works both as a gorgeous period piece and as a political drama. The story follows the Prince of Salina and his family as everything around them is changing. The show digs into power, ambition, and the politics of the era. Nobody's strictly good, and everyone's playing their own game. Compared to Visconti's movie, the series really leans into all the scheming. It's a slow burn, lots of power moves under the surface, loyalties shifting, that kind of thing. The ending even gives off some Godfather vibes. Cable Girls is a Spanish period drama that ran 5 seasons on Netflix. It was Netflix's first original show out of Spain, right before stuff like Money Heist and Elite hit big. The story starts in 1928 Madrid, following 4 young women working as switchboard operators, literally plugging calls together for the country's telephone company. You get classic melodrama, secret pasts, cheating husbands, forbidden romances, and even crime, all wrapped up in flapper-era fashion. Think Mad Men meets a telenovela, but set in Spain. The show moves from the late 20s right into the 1930s and even covers the Spanish Civil War in the later seasons. Not everything's historically perfect, of course. The characters are way more modern in their attitudes than real people from that era, and the soundtrack is full of modern pop, kind of like what Peaky Blinders did. There's a bunch of progressive plots, too. One character even ends up in a polyamorous relationship with her boyfriend and a trans colleague. It's definitely soapy, but it works. People get hooked, and the general consensus is that it's addictive, even if it's heavy-handed at times, and not always accurate with the slang. Alias Grace is a Canadian 6-episode limited series, adapted from Margaret Atwood's novel, which is itself based on a real murder case from the 1800s. Atwood tells the story of Grace Marks, an Irish immigrant maid in Canada, who was just 16, and she got accused of murdering her employer and his housekeeper in 1843. The show jumps between past and present. Grace, now in prison in an asylum, tells her story to a young doctor who's trying to figure out if she's actually guilty or if there's something else going on. It's a dark, psychological period drama. You see Grace's rough childhood, her years as a servant, and what led up to the murders. The whole thing is a big question mark. Was Grace innocent, a victim, or was she a killer? If you watch The Handmaid's Tale, this is like a much slower companion. Less shock value, more character study and tension. It's smartly adapted, beautifully produced, and most people who stuck with it found it gripping, even if the slow pace wasn't for everyone. The Cook of Castamar is a Spanish series set in 18th century Madrid, right during the reign of Philip V. The main character is Clara. She's a talented cook, but she's also got severe agoraphobia, thanks to her father being executed in the War of Succession. She ends up working in the kitchens at Castamar, the estate of Duke Diego, who's newly widowed and clearly still carrying a lot of baggage. What makes this show work is the mix of slow burn romance and the whole upstairs-downstairs thing you see in stuff like Downton Abbey. Clara starts to win people over through her cooking, and before long there's something brewing between her and the Duke. Meanwhile, the Duke is supposed to marry someone from the nobility, and there's a ton of scheming from other nobles and even the servants. The food scenes here are seriously next level. Every dish gets treated like a work of art, so don't watch if you're hungry. Visually, the series is stunning. Costumes, palace gardens, old world kitchens. It's got all the big period piece drama, secrets, blackmail, sudden duels, a scheming ex, and a love story that's basically Cinderella with more kitchen scenes. Sure, it's a soap, and you can see most of the twists coming, but it's all so well done, you just go with it. The Empress is another European historical drama, this time German, and it's all about the early life of Empress Elizabeth of Austria. The show kicks off in the 1850s, when teenage Elizabeth, a Bavarian duchess, winds up marrying Emperor Franz instead of her older sister. Suddenly, she's dropped into Vienna's royal court, and it's a minefield of power plays and family drama. Elizabeth is an outsider, and most of the series is her trying to figure out who to trust. Her mother-in-law is basically running the empire behind the scenes and sees Elizabeth as a threat. There's also pressure on Elizabeth to produce an heir, and a lot of tension with Franz's younger brother, Maximilian, who's always looking for an opening. It's got this big, sweeping romance. Elizabeth and Franz are actually into each other, which is rare for royal marriages. But there's always someone in the way, and the political backdrop means there's more going on than just love triangles. If you're into The Crown or Bridgerton, the Empress delivers the same kind of lush costumes, court intrigue, and slow-burn personal drama. The Dig is a British historical drama about the 1939 Sutton Hoo excavation, which ended up being one of the biggest archaeological finds in British history. Carey Mulligan plays Edith, a widow living in Suffolk, and she hires Basil Brown, played by Ralph Fiennes, to dig up these mysterious mounds on her land. What they end up finding is an ancient Anglo-Saxon ship burial packed with treasure. But the movie isn't just about digging up old stuff. It's mostly about the people around the dig. Basil Brown is self-taught, super humble, and he forms this quiet, real bond with Edith, who's dealing with illness and worrying about her son's future. What makes The Dig work is the atmosphere. It's slow, very reflective, and honestly, it feels like reading a novel. Carey Mulligan and Ralph Fiennes are both just as good as you'd expect. The whole thing is elegant, a little sad, and really just about people trying to hold on to something meaningful before it's gone. Gun City is a Spanish crime thriller set in 1921 Barcelona, a city that's basically boiling over with unrest. You've got anarchist labor unions clashing with police and the government, street gangs running rackets, and the entire place is just on edge. The main guy is a cop, a veteran of the Rif War, who gets sent from Madrid to Barcelona. The movie is basically a Spanish version of a noir gangster story, but with a historical edge. Think The Untouchables or early Peaky Blinders, only it's all happening in Catalonia. The visuals are the real hook here. There's atmospheric set pieces, smoky jazz clubs, narrow streets, vintage cars, period costumes, all of it convincing. They built massive sets and even put down actual tram tracks just to recreate what Barcelona looked like in the 1920s. For a Spanish film, the scale is pretty impressive. The story is packed, almost too much at times. There's police corruption, gangster turf wars, and the cop's own vendetta all running at the same time. So it does get a bit convoluted, but it's never dull.